Okay, so Enneagram, I would love to know your initial thoughts and questions. And then, of course, with how you scored, if you want me to like drill down into the detail, I am ready.
Well, I think like the very first thing I was curious about was, is like a five a five, a six a six, a seven, or is it specific to each person?
Oh, great question. Okay, so a five is a five, like that has like universal meaning in the Enneagram.
Yeah.
However, so all fives have the same wing choice. So, like, one of the pages I like is page 15, and it talks about your wings. And then one of the pages I find that's helpful is page 23, which talks about your lines. So, all fives have the same wings and the same lines. But one of the things that this report looks at is what's your primary instinct. So, you scoring highest as a social instinct will show up differently than a five that shows up with a 1-to-1 or a self-preservation instinct. And then also, this report identifies what is trademarked as tri-type, which is a different kind of school of thought of the Enneagram, but it's the idea that you think a certain way, you act a certain way, and you feel a certain way. So you scored as a 5-4-9. So you that is a kind of distinctive pairing of you, where if you were interacting with fives who had a different instinct or a different tri-type, while you would still likely have some camaraderie as fives, you're going to notice like variations and differences.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful.
Did it help? I know it's a
Yeah.
lot of information, but you also scored as a five, so I feel like you can handle it.
Yeah. No. Okay. And so I guess my overall impression was I thought it was pretty, like reading through it, I was like, this is pretty good.
Okay.
And, there, like one of the themes that I was noticing,
I mean,
and
honestly, even the fact that you read it is like very five. Because I always tell people, like, hey, you can look at it, but it's a lot of information. So some people like me to just translate it, but I'm like, of course you read it. Of course you did.
oh yeah, I read it and I highlighted it
Of course you did. Yeah, I love it.
and I think it's interesting because I think like over the course of this past year,
Mhm.
I've had to like confront a bunch of these things.
Yes.
And so it's been it was cool to like read them and then see them. And then it's like one of the things, like I guess one of the bigger things is like the thinking, and then the emotional part of it.
Mm.
And um like I remember back like at the very beginning of coaching, one of like one of the things I like ran into right away was I was like, as soon as someone talks about like any sort of like feeling or something, I like deflect or I like change the subject because
Mhm.
it was I felt like it's an invasion of like their privacy to go
Sure.
there. And so
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
and well, so it's like that was something that immediately I was like, I have to like deal with this because this is a problem. Like this has to be addressed here. Um, and so it was like that was something that was like showing up in this
Hmm.
and like the time, like being very protective of time is
Hmm.
something that I'm also very, very aware of.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So a couple things that come to mind as you describe that is also because one, fives have a four wing, but also your feeling type, you're the feeling types, and I'll show you a graph. You scored highest as a four. So when you feel, it's deep. It's deep and it's serious. Like the fours, like you're talking about like trauma therapists, like artists, like the fours will go there. None of this, like the twos are more loving, the threes are more focused on achievement, and the fours are like, what is down here in the depths? So some of you not touching on that is probably because you are like honoring how big that feeling is, and
Yeah.
or from your lens how big that feeling might be. And so just out of kind of deference and respect for your role as a coach, you might not be touching it. So that's one food for thought on that. The other thing, there's a podcast episode that I think is really helpful. So it's a series of podcasts. It's called Sleeping at Last, and he did a bunch of podcasts a couple years ago. It was like probably like 2019 to like 2020 something, and he did one on each type. And even if it's not your kind of music, like I think the content is fascinating and illuminating. And one of the things that the speakers talks about, I think on the 5 episode, if not it's on the 4 episode, is that on the Enneagram symbol itself, that there's a gap between 4 and 5, and they call it like the great chasm or something like that. And because the 5s have so much intellectual knowledge and the 4s have so much depth of feeling, it's two really strong kind of strengths, but in a very different that shows up in a very different way, and they're right next to each other. So that's just I say that just to honor like the depth of both your emotions and your insights.
Yeah, that is very much what it is, because I do feel like it is so um it is so like sacred. It's like
Yes.
want to be yeah, it's like it's still happening. Like today in a session, like a client he was talking about his parents who had passed, and it's like that's for him. And so it's like I don't know how to be with that for him.
Sure.
Like it's so I do that is how it is, because I do feel like how I feel like with things is very strong, but it
Mhm.
is the expression of it that or the exchange of it that doesn't proceed.
Mhm. Well, and here's the thing, it's characteristic. So fives are brilliant types, but they don't necessarily feel brilliant because they're so busy collecting information and they know there's so much more information out there that they don't necessarily see themselves, frankly, as insightful that they are. So your focus may be on like what you're missing or what you're lacking, but others potentially see you and like see how insightful that you are and what you have to bring to the table. It's something I noticed because obviously I know you from your individual sessions, but you never spoke to me in class, right? But in class, other people would be like, "Oh, in the breakouts," and they would quote what you said because you have brought insight to the table, but it's also like how you share it is important. What I'm
Yeah.
also seeing coming up, and like at the risk of like, I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information, but what I also see is coming up is the way that you take action is like a 9, and 9s are very cautious about taking up space. They are brilliant at creating space for everyone else. They're the peacemakers, they're balancers, they hold everyone else in the space, but sometimes it's very difficult for them to figure out like, well, who am I to speak up? Who am I to say? So what I'm hearing in your coaching is there's all of the kind of knowledge that you have, there's all of the emotion, but then when it comes to taking action, there's probably also a part of you that's like, well, who am I to label this? I'll just hold the space for them.
Yeah. I I like wrote like the taking up spacing in my notes about this, because it talked a lot about the like having the information, and then like the oversharing, and then it being too like almost like domineering.
Mm,
And and for me, I don't feel that way towards it, but I do feel like the sharing is because I tend to be like more in that listener space. And so
mm,
I defer to that. And so I don't want to like interject and put
mhm,
like, yeah, I would rather, or I tend to do that where it's let me open up the space for other people instead of
mhm.
putting interjecting mine. So I relate more
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah. Domineering, did it say that 5s are domineering?
It didn't use the word domineering, but it had like, I was attaching a negative connotation to it. It was
Okay.
like, it was, it was like a kind of like know-it-all, like kind of like, uh,
Oh, okay.
the like, it sort of was like you have all this information, and then like once you start going, then it's just like here's a bunch of like
Pulls
information.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then like overwhelmed with like just words is how I was imagining it. But
I
um,
think I think some of that happens because people can't keep up, or sometimes you have other types that are more like instinctive decision makers or who are acting more on surface information. So honestly, like the depth of knowledge that the fives have. For example, like if you were to tell me something, I'm a very instinctual type. So eights are very like instinct driven, like quick decisions. So more than likely off the gate, I'm like, oh, we're going this way. And so sometimes I think it's just thinking about translating how do you show up and then what is the client seeking or what is the person you're interacting with seeking. But this also reminds me of your student who said what, like he calls you like your Buddha insights, right?
Yeah.
Or but I think that's an example is that I'm not surprised that you have I'm not surprised that you have clients asking you specifically for your insights because what you're coming to the table with is very insightful, but then also to be put on the spot in a coaching session to be like to speak before you're ready, that's not going to be you at your best.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you can't do it. You can totally do it, but you're so thoughtful and you're so focused on the feelings and you're so focused on how do I hold the space for someone else to just kind of package it up into an insight that's concise. That's
Hmm.
a lot of skills that you've translated from an immediate ask from a client.
Hmm. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting to me, and we can like geek out a little bit if you want to like, because it gives me a summary. So it shows me how you scored in each type. What's
Yeah.
interesting to me is what I felt like was showing up in your coaching was potentially some of your six wing, your ability to like mitigate risks and look at the worst case scenario and stuff like that. But you didn't score particularly high in six. So we can take a look at that. But before I show you even more information, what other either questions or is there anything specific you want to take away from our time on this?
Hmm. I think I guess maybe just like the understanding of like what do you do with this? Like now that you know this information, then well, I guess like the other thing I'm thinking is now it's like I'm trying to like course correct some of this stuff or like address the other side of it. And like how much of that do you do where it's like how much of that can you like balance? So I'm thinking like with the just like being able to just like share the words, right? So I'm doing this like public speaking course right now
Hmm,
because
good.
it's something that I have been
Any fives who are watching this, if we post this, are going to be like, "Oh, public speaking." I mean, good on you for learning and like going out there, but like, hey, girl, get it. You are getting it. Like
I
you
know,
are not shy about learning. Props to you.
I know, but I was like, I have to do this. So but like, is it, and I'm like, I can do it, like I'll be able to just do this like
Mhm.
naturally, but is the expectation like, okay, I'll be able to get to the five threshold of this public speaking sort of a deal, or just the comfort of being able to do that. Do you know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? Like what is,
I do.
yeah.
Yeah. So I would say, like, from a positive psychology perspective, we want you to be the best five that you can be. The goal is not to change your type, it's to have deep knowledge and awareness of, like, hey, what's my type? How's it serving me? What is it not serving me? What are my options and resources? Because that's a cool thing about the Enneagram. It's like, oh, you can try this, or like, here's your default strategy, but here's some other strategies. So it's like, we'll introduce you a little bit to some of your other resources, some of which you're already going to be aware of, but some of which you might be like, I hadn't thought about that before. And then as far as public speaking, you can absolutely build your skill which I think is just a good skill, executive presence, public speaking. It's just wise. You're of course going to feel more confident speaking in an area where you have great knowledge. However, it's just something to be mindful of that as a five, or, as long as this feels like it's the type for you, you're
Mhm.
not necessarily going to feel like you have great knowledge, but then you're going to watch someone else speak and speak off the cuff and you'll be like, their facts weren't right. And like, you won't necessarily say anything, but you'll know, like, I've done an analysis of that data and that's not actually correct. So I think one of the things to think about is it's hard for the fives sometimes because they feel like they don't have enough information and so they're constantly gathering information. So then it's just thinking about in your life, in your business, in your practice, when you want to be like, and this came up with your predictive index as well, right? When it's like, okay, that's enough information and I'm going for it.
Mm,
So, my hope for you is that the public speaking will build your confidence in that. Will you ever truly feel ready? By your standards, maybe not. But it doesn't mean you won't like knock the socks off the people that you present to. You just are, as a specialist and also as a five, you want the information.
yeah, no, that makes sense.
It's the
Yeah.
same kind of thing with mentoring, because I was like, "Oh, you don't need a mentor, like, it's part of the program." And, like, nope, here we are, right? But it makes sense because you're building your specialization, you're building your knowledge, and you are going to be more confident as a coach, as a business owner, as you work out in the world because you have that information.
Yeah. Yeah. And being able to move from like thought to action quicker is something that am like have my like a sight on right now is like that's something that I'm trying to improve.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I'll yeah.
Yeah, so speaking of thought to action, so one of the things that this report talks about is centers of expression. And your centers of expression, you scored highest in thinking, not surprising for a five, and then action and then feelings. So the way that we look at that is aim, fire, but then the ready comes after. Does that resonate?
Oh yeah. Like I have to just do it. I have to just like make myself do it and then get ready for it.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
the way so the different like there's no right or wrong. It's just kind of we all have even though ready aim fire is like how the phrase goes, there doesn't have to be a specific stack in your centers of expression, but what's interesting is you're working on moving to action quicker, which makes sense, but it's also reflected that you're aiming and you're getting the information and then you're firing, but from an emotional perspective, you may not feel ready until after it happens.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. So then that's just good awareness. So as far as like what do you do with this? It's like if we know our patterns, we can use them to our advantage. So the next time you're trying to make a major decision and you don't feel ready, you can be like, "Well, I don't normally feel ready." But
Yeah.
is there something in that pattern? Is there something in the information you're collecting? Is there support that you need? You know what I mean? Are there mechanisms that you can put into place to help you feel ready? Knowing that ready for you, though, comes probably after you've already taken action.
hmm Yeah, I like that. It's just like these words are just words and then you reassign their meaning.
Mm, okay. And then as far as like speaking to your clients, like when they ask you a question, you're not an easy button. You don't have to have beautifully packaged stuff like ready for them. You can also just I think it's helpful to have transition phrases to be like, "Oh, let me think about that." Or "Let me reflect on that and I'll circle back with you after the meeting." Or "I've made a note of this and we can take a couple minutes at the end." So or to just be like, "Well, you can also just what am I trying to say? You can brush it off, not in a bad way, but to just be like, hey, like this is your session. So while I'm happy to share your thoughts, I'd like to hear from you first. And usually when we hand the mic back, they don't hand it back right away. Unless they're a southerner, then it gets handed back right away. And you better be ready.
Okay. Yeah, I think yeah, hearing that one conversation we went over where it was like you don't have to respond. I
No.
think it is nice to hear because I do feel like um the pressure of like okay they're asking me a
Mhm.
question you have to have the answer.
No. Yeah.
But I think it is true like just being able to and have something in my back pocket ready to go.
No, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of energy and work. Also because you are so thoughtful and you are so focused on the information and you're also so impactful. So like for you, someone else is just gonna, like, speak without thinking, like, you're not a that's not you. You're
Yeah.
not gonna speak without thinking. So, I think what's good is, like, your clients want your insight. So, if and when and as you have insight you want to share, share it. But if someone asks you, you don't owe them anything. And then also, just know it's a tendency of a 5, in my impression as not being a 5, It's a tendency of the fives to like underestimate how truly informed they actually are and how helpful their insight actually is. Because as the five, they're still focused on like, well, I don't have enough information. I haven't checked the resources. I haven't fact checked over here. But still, for someone like me who's an instinctful decision maker, I'm not going to hit the books at all. Right. So the fact that you've hit like 17 books and can
Right.
tell me, like, give me a synthesis of that, that's super useful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Um, the other thing I was curious about in this is it was that social part
Yes.
was the one thing that I was like, I don't know if I fully am understanding that or fully aligning with that part.
Yeah,
And I was curious to get your take.
sure. So the Enneagram, to anyone new to the Enneagram, the most important thing to know is like the types. And that's a ton of information by itself. I like that each type has a set amount of wings and then lines because it helps us understand like how we move around within the type, but even the wings and lines can be confusing. Then there's additional areas of study that, frankly, a lot of the fives have written books about the Enneagram. That's part of why we know this stuff. Um, Additional thoughts of study related to the instincts. And some people actually think the instincts are even more important than Enneagram. I'm of the like, I prioritize the Enneagram over the instincts, but I think that it's interesting. So everyone has all three: self-preservation, social, and one-to-one. So the one-to-one has, also known as the sexual instinct, has a like strong intensity. It's just like everything's like turned, it's like a very strong intensity of whatever it is. It's like turned up higher. They also really value those like one-on-one relationships. Social is not necessarily like social, like extroverted. It means that you're reading the whole room. And so you as a social five may have a sense of where the information is, where I as a social eight will have a sense of where the power is and where the power might be being abused or appropriately kind of allocated. Whereas the self-preservations are more focused on their own needs. Like, do I have the resources to be successful? And so whether that's a tangible thing, like they have, first aid kits and snacks and all of that stuff, or if it's something thinking about like salary, things like that. So we all have all three, but the one that we lead with kind of flavors our Enneagram type. And as we move around the Enneagram, like that comes up. So they joke about going to a party. I hope I'll give you this example. For other people, I would have stopped talking, but I'm gonna give you this example. But you stop me if it's too much information. If the instincts go to a party, the self-pres instinct knows they're leaving early because they have a big meeting tomorrow. The social is paying attention to like who's there, who do they want to talk to, like overlooking the room. And then the one-on-one gets caught up in a conversation and they don't care what time it is because they're like all about that conversation.
Okay.
So we all have all three. And your stack, you scored highest with social. Almost, it's actually over double the score of one-on-one and then self-preservation. So your ability to read a room and read people and read their needs is likely very high. And I have a feeling your 9 action style like turns that up even more. And then your 4, you're probably part of the reason you may not know what to say in a coaching session when someone brings up something really emotional is you may actually be even more in touch with that emotion than they are.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
So, page 11 of your report should feel like it's like ripped out of your diary because it
Yeah.
takes type 5 and it layers the social instinct on top. So
Okay.
that's one to take a look at because, or if you, I like Beatrice Chestnut's 9 Types of Leadership because each type has a chapter and then it's specifically leadership focused. I mean, there's so many amazing resources on the Enneagram, but it's specifically leadership focused. And then she also breaks that out on the instincts to be like, here's how a 5 social leads, here's your strengths and overuse, here's some things as a heads up. So the podcast and that book are 2 of my favorite Enneagram resources.
Okay. Yeah, this one this page did resonate a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be the one that feels like the deepest. And
Mhm.
so social 5 is totem, so there's an acknowledgement of, like, where you came from and who supported you to get there. Which
Mhm.
also makes sense. So I is this so eights and fives are connected. We have a line together. So when I move to five or you move to eight, it's also the social version of that type. So you keep your instinct when you move. So when you step into a more assertive space, you are still thinking about others' needs and are likely still kind of nicer, even when you're kind of stepping into that power. And then when you step into 7 and are more like looking at the possibilities and the option, you're still doing it from a very people-focused place because you take that social instinct with you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and then the other thing that I was just curious about with this was I have like a very I have like a very I'm very indecisive,
Okay.
and I was wondering if that was part of it was something, which page was it? It was something on here. It had like an interesting, it was oh yeah, that triadic style
Okay.
on page 14. And and I wonder if like that's something as well, like to be able to utilize this information to be able to help become a better, or yeah, I guess yeah, better like in decision making, or
Mhm.
more like clarity in decision making.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that so there's a quote, I'm not sure who says it, but like to know what's enough is true wealth. And the my perspective on the difficulty in making decisions is that as a 5, you're looking at so much information. And then you have that 4 wing, you scored highest in 4 on the feeling style. So then there's all the emotional data, there's all the intellectual data, and then 9s, it can be difficult for 9s to assert themselves and be decisive because they're so good at holding the space for everyone else. So you have like a trifecta
Mhm.
of just collecting and analyzing information, but to be the one who specifically is like, boom, we're going this way, or we're making this decision, that is going to be more of a stretch as far as like what seat you're most comfortable in. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but it does mean that potentially, like when you're working on a team or as you work with certain leaders, having leaders who really tap into the fact that you are so analytical and are looking at things from all angles will be helpful for you. Or if you were the leader of the team, having someone else who potentially like makes recommendations or helps you kind of parse through, because it's not that you don't know what you're talking about, it's just someone else is looking at, like, 1 data set of this, and you're looking at 3 huge data sets, and that's a lot of information.
Mhm.
So think about it as, like, processing time. If you're just processing from one source, like, boom, you're good to go. So, can you change your decision-making time? Yes. But is that gonna feel correct to you?
Mhm. Okay. I like that, the processing time, because I've always felt like I'm a slow processor, like everyone's like going so much faster. And so that's comforting to
You have
hear.
a bigger data set though, and you have a like triple threat data set because you look at all the people with the social and the 9, you look at all the feelings and you look at all the information. So, of course, someone who like didn't look like, or like just even me as an intuitive, I'm like, yeah, let's go. Right?
Yeah.
And if you were like, "How do you know that we're gonna go?" I'm like, "Well, my intuition says go. Like, let's go,
Yeah.
baby. Like, we'll clean it up later if we need to clean it up, right?" So it's just a different style, but 5 and 8 are connected. So you do have that. So one of the best pages I think is what is it, 23? So 23 will show you your lines and it'll show you kind of like when do you want to leverage maybe like, because what you're not necessarily pulling in is your intuitive data set, and
Mhm.
that is maybe more your line to 8.
Okay. Okay. And so how do you pull in your intuitive?
Yeah, well, let's see what they say. Let's see what they say. Sorry, my computer's not responding. Oh, no, it's like, "Hey, you have to answer this as an intuitive. You don't get to see the report." What I would say, and this is where maybe your sixth wing. So you have neighbors on both sides. You have the 4, very deep emotions. You have the 6, which is very strong, like risk mitigation. What I say is like one of your neighbors have sugar and one has spice. Um,
Mhm.
both of your neighbors are pretty strong flavors. It's pretty spicy. Um, I think what I would encourage you as far as like tapping into the 8 is like when can you know that you have enough information to move or to have confidence in yourself that if you move and it's quote unquote wrong or you get more information later that you can correct it? Because what I always tell leaders is like you make the best information that you have with you make the best decision you can with the information you have at the time. Because a lot of people, a lot of like the angst people feel is because 'cause they're like, "Oh, if I had only knew." You didn't have that information when you made the decision. If you had that information when you made the decision and you chose quote unquote wrong, well, then what did you learn from it? So some of this I think is just decision making and confidence in your own self, because I don't know that you're ever gonna feel like you have enough information. Your data set is always gonna be you're always gonna process a larger data set.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking like there's usually like a tipping point where it's with like whatever I'm doing, where it's like getting the information or doing whatever is like enjoyable, and then it becomes like stressful and it becomes like a burden.
Okay?
And so I am wondering if it is really about leaning into that, and like when it tips over,
Mhm.
then it's like time to like that's enough.
Yeah. Do you get any signals before it tips?
It's usually just a like it just usually just like the feeling of it, like it becomes like just like restricting feeling almost like
Okay. Yeah. So I
yeah.
would just pay attention to that moment and then see if you can get data even before that moment. So for example, I don't usually get full-blown migraines because I get the eye aura. So the second I get the eye aura, if I take Advil, then I'm fine. So now if I get a migraine, it usually only happens when I'm asleep because I missed the signal that the eye aura would have given me if I was awake.
Okay.
So some of it is just learning, like it's great that you see the point where it tips, but I would just pay attention to what can you do before it tips? And then also my feeling on the fives is the decisions that you make are so insightful. You don't necessarily have to make as many as everybody else. Like if you think about it from a quality versus a quantity, if you're trying to produce as much quantity as far as like decisions and actions as someone who isn't thinking about all those things, that's going to put a lot of time crunch and time pressure on you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. That's yeah, and I think also it's like that satisficing versus I forget what the other one is, but versus like maximizing, or it's
Mm,
something like that. And it's like knowing when it's worth doing the like quality of it. And so like for example, like if I'm like buying like a shirt, I don't need to do all the looking for what's the best shirt, you know? I can just be okay with this will do, you
yeah.
know?
And you
Versus,
can return it if you find a better shirt.
yeah.
You know? I
Yeah.
and also here's the thing, what I would say is percentages. So if I had a 5 tell me like, "Hey, I'm 50% sure," or "I'm 60% sure," I would potentially take that over someone else's 80 to 90% because it's coming from a 5. So they're looking at a lot of data because it's like you're going to go and like read reviews and you're going to do research and like the amount of research you probably put into that shirt. Whereas I'm like, oh, I like that shirt.
Yeah.
But
Right.
that's not right. It's just different.
Yeah, it is. But I think yeah. But sometimes it's not fun to have to do all that. It's like, why am I torturing myself with this? And so I think, yeah, knowing or yeah, playing around with that, like, do I want to? Maybe like before entering into it.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's something just to play around with, I
Yeah.
think.
To be like, how much analysis do I want to give this?
Yeah.
And here's a way I look at it. Let's see if this helps you. So when there's something I have to solve, I look at like how much time is it going to take versus my billable rate, and then I decide if it's worth it to me to solve or not.
Yeah.
Because the thing
That's
is that like if you let's say you're charging for your time, whatever you're charging for your time, you know you're going to charge more for your time later, right? So if you spend 2 hours researching a shirt, like that's an expensive shirt,
it's so true. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then you can also use a friend of mine says every time someone gives you a compliment, you take $5 off. So, you can always
Oh,
buy it and you get compliments. And like it'll earn you money before you know it.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Because
Yeah.
you, even just as an analyst, are probably going to feel better if you go in and you have a system to be like, hey, I'm going to just grab whatever I can, or I'm going to spend no more than 20 minutes, or, like, but I wouldn't put pressure. There's a book called How to Be Happy, Damn It. And I don't know if it's in that one or the sequel, but it says
Yeah.
like, don't compare your Clark Kent to other people's Superman. So yes, you may quote unquote take longer to process, but I would argue you have all these other skills that the people who aren't taking a long time to process aren't necessarily bringing to the table, but you're not necessarily seeing those.
Okay. Yes, this is the thing of like, do lean into the strengths of it instead
Mhm.
of focusing on the deficiencies
Yeah.
or like, presumed deficiencies.
There we go. Presumed deficiencies.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. Okay.
And as far as like what you do with this, I mean, I know the report has like 1,000 recommendations, so it could be a little overwhelming. What is something that you might want to try?
I don't know. Well, because my first instinct is just to like call out the things that um where I feel like pain points that match with it and then try to address it. But then I'm wondering, like with those wings, is that a good place to put attention? Like how can I expand it so it's not just like a strict five, it is more like into the reach.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I don't how do like what do you think? How do people usually utilize it?
Yeah, I mean it's so much information. What I like to do is look for the kind of what's the low-hanging fruit. So whether there's something that it just feels like it's easy to implement and to give a try, or if it's something that's like causing you a lot of pain and you're like, "Hey, this is like an easy implementation and I can see if I can gain." So it's kind of it's the whole thing. It's like experiment and test. So you may want to take like one strategy at a time and try it and be like, "Hey, I'm going to try this for 2 weeks." And, maybe you try it for a couple days and you're like, "This is not my strategy." And like, just toss that one out, right? Like, just try something else. So but I like that what speaks to me is you said instinct. And that's you're speaking my language on that because that's where I make my decisions. So I do think like looking at like what's your instinct, which also speaks to the range. So a 6 at their best taps into their own insight. Sixes will get information from everyone else from all these sources, but like a true growth of the six is when they see that all the different sources that actually like the guidance is like within them. And then fours live their best when they're just truly authentic, but they realize that the dark side is only half of the range. There's a dark side and the light side to the authenticity. So it's like truly authentic. So if you're using your wings, I think if you were to pick a strategy do a little research or spend a little time with it and see like how authentic is this to me? And do I feel that this has truly made me better? And then you may even want to document it.
Mhm.
That's one of the things, it's so funny, but one of the ways that I learned how to use my instincts was I made a spreadsheet. And I was like, because what was happening is I was hesitating, and what was happening is I had a knowing, but I wasn't able to speak it. And so it was really weird because all of a sudden I didn't know how to like speak my truth. And that had never happened to me before. And I felt kind of stupid. Like, why can I say this? But sometimes instincts often don't come out, at least for most people when they're learning, as like fully formed thoughts. It'll just come out as like yes, no, or maybe. And so I kept getting the instinct to wait. And so I started writing down in a work context, like, when did I get the instinct to wait? What actually happened? And then what happened after? And what happened when I had a whole spreadsheet of data about my instincts, which 8 has a line to 5. That's like such a 5 thing.
Yeah.
Um, I was like, "Oh, hesitation for me is one of my strongest instincts," because 8s don't naturally hesitate. One of the work we have to do is to not jump so right to action. Like, we'll fire without aiming or being ready. Like, we're always ready. Like, we're always firing. So us actually pulling back and thinking about it. So, but that was really helpful because it took from like me feeling stupid, like why do I not know what I'm doing anymore? And like why am I not articulating this? And this happened in my like mid to late 20s. So I was just like, what is happening to me? But then all of a sudden to realize that, oh, I was getting instinctual information that I just didn't have the vocabulary for yet. And I needed to create the space for, because I'm used to being able to speak quickly, but there are some things where if my instinct says, wait, you don't have all the information yet, I've learned how to honor that. And I've learned I needed to learn language to be able to say that to someone, to be like, hey, like, I just have a feeling we're going to get more information about this. Let's table this decision. Or it sounds like we're about 80% on this. Let's circle back to this on this day. And even if we can't circle back, it's saying, like, hey, I'm about 80%, but I feel like we're missing something. And that's just not, one, I didn't know what the pause was, and two, I didn't have the vocabulary for it. So I share that in case you want to make your own spreadsheet.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very interesting because it's like, yeah, you like building credibility around it almost.
Yeah, because I needed the data because I was like, I don't understand what's happening and why am I hesitating? I'm not a hesitator. But what happened is like I didn't say something or I didn't do something. And then what ended up happening, because I documented what happened after I didn't say something. And what I
Mhm.
was seeing is it was resolving itself. And if I had acted, which is what I would have done before, I would have changed the process or the outcome in a way that I thought was actually not superior to how it panned out. Now, if I was someone who was always holding back, I don't think I would say hesitation is my strongest instinct. But knowing that 8s on the Enneagram have to pay attention to actually thinking before they act, it's not particularly surprising that when I get the instinct that it's not the moment, then it's not the moment.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to, yeah, so I will want to play around with some things. I think like with the instinct, it's hard because I do like sometimes I'll try to be like, okay, I'm gonna try to make an like if I'm feeling conflicted around a decision, I'll try to be like, okay, let me just try to do this instinctively. Like, let me just try to see what it is. And then I will get caught in that loop of like, well, I'm feeling this way, but I'm also having this. And so it does sort of get me into a knot. But then ultimately I will make a decision. So maybe that's maybe I wonder if that's it. Like, which one do I rely on? Like the head, the of
Mhm.
those three areas. Like, does an instinct come from one of those? Or is it from the
So
combination?
yeah, so the body types 891 are more instinctually driven. The 567 are more head types. So the argument is that you, when feeding your head and feeding the intellectual part of yourself, will do your best.
Okay.
But I just heard that when you were kind of in analysis paralysis, our defaults serve us most of the time. So the goal is not for you to go over and be an instinctual decision maker. That's my happy place. So if you were an 8, 9, or 1, I'd be like, "Hey, let's turn that up. How do we turn that up? How are you gonna be in your body?" But for a 5, it's more, how do you manage anxiety of not having enough or enough information or enough resources or being crowded or not having enough time or someone's asking me to speak and I don't know what to say. And then also knowing that you love information, it feeds you, but then to a certain at some point, it's either too much or it's become analysis paralysis. So really what you're, not that it's all about decision making, but I think you're probably just learning your parameters. Like when am I geeking out in a positive way? And then when am I stuck?
Mhm. Yeah. And I think also to that, um, like wanting to share it more.
Mhm.
Something that I'm also feeling like um recently.
With others?
Yeah, or just like in general, like I'm just wanting, like I'm feeling I'm more of a pull towards that like collaboration or just like outlets to like share
Mhm.
or and so um yeah, trying to be more like open up that like I don't know, it's like allowing myself to like participate more in that and try to be more comfortable in that. Is something that I'm also maybe want to work on.
Yeah. Look at it. Look at when it serves you and doesn't, because the thing is like a 5 at their happiest is going to be like in the library surrounded by books, right? So it's not necessarily, it doesn't mean that you won't have. So I would think about it from a cultivating trust and safety perspective. Like, what do you need to feel safe to share? Like, what creates environments for you where you can share without being fully processed and you don't feel judged? Or it builds your confidence, because some of this, what we're talking about, is like just getting your reps in. So if you feel safe enough to go out of your comfort zone, you're not you're unlikely to ever be someone who like shares off the cuff unless you like set that as a life goal for yourself. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's not, that doesn't have to be you.
Yeah.
So, but if you're feeling like you want to share more, I would just make sure it's actually you that wants it and not
Yeah.
other people. And then if it is you that wants it, based on the way that you pursue your goals, like I have every confidence in you.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's how I'm feeling it. Like not just like not like becoming more like social in that way,
Mhm,
but yeah, like in those settings where it is where the trust is there because I do feel like that's definitely a factor.
mhm,
Um, because it talked about like hoarding the information. And so I feel like I definitely was like, oh yeah, that does happen. And so I want to like let up on that because when I do share and then I can like have the conversations, it does feel so good to be able to like have other people know it and
mhm,
then like bring more into it.
mhm. Yeah. Well, and not surprisingly, that report was written by a social 5, actually. So a lot of the ways that 5 share is through writing. Because then you can, so your primary kind of tactic for like strategy is what's called withdrawn. So you withdrawing into, like, they kind of joke like the castle that has the moat around it, right? You withdrawing into the library or into the castle is often part of your like happy recharging place. Even me, when I go on my line to 5, I disappear. Like I'll hit the books and I'll close the doors. So one of the things to think about is whether it's a blog post or writing or journaling, or you want to write a book someday or whatever. Not that you have to write, that may not be your medium, but oftentimes the reason we have so many gifts from the 5s is because a lot of them write it down. And then that's the way they share and dialogue and exchange, as opposed to um, it doesn't mean you can't have the verbal discussion. As a social 5, you're probably more likely to, but then also like who do you trust so that you truly can present something and be like, I have an idea about this, and you're safe enough to say that without feeling like you're supposed to be correct. Because you, both on your predictive index and your Enneagram, are likely to feel like you need to say the double, tripled, quadruple check correct answer when the
Mhm.
rest of us are just like shooting the shit.
Yeah. 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 The writing is interesting because that's something that um I don't like write, but I like jot down my
Mhm.
uh just on a whim. And so it is helpful for me to like put my ideas, my thoughts out on in writing, and I'll usually do that. And it's become more frequent recently over the past couple,
Cool.
probably the past like year.
Yeah, and maybe your whims are like Instagram, like visuals with just a couple words or images, you know what I mean? Like whatever, you don't have to share them with anybody. But if and when you want to share, if you pick your medium and a medium that speaks to you, it doesn't have to be the medium that other people are sharing in.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. What are you taking away from this time?
Gosh, it's so much. It's just so interesting to like read all this stuff about yourself because it's very it's like a reflection of yourself right there. And the way that they frame it is very it's like it's very whole, it's very complete because it gives you not just it doesn't like drill into something that's bad or something that's good. It's like all the opportunities within it. So I think that's kind of how I want to like that's what I want to take away from this is just actually I think that's what it is. I think it is like that I think that's probably it. It's like there's just like the allowance of this is like how you are, this is who you are. And it's probably like for the best to like um almost like seep into that
Mhm.
instead of like trying to force other things, but then at the same time there's like growth and there's like challenge and there's like which is but I think choosing to do that in alignment with who you are and what you want.
Yeah. What comes to mind to me is, in the spirit of coaching, right? You're already resourceful and whole. We're not trying to fix you. We're not trying to change your numbers. But
Yeah.
then when someone's coming to coaching and we know they're resourceful and whole, it's like, and what would you like to do? Like, how are you growing within your context? So
Yeah.
I like you saying the word opportunities because it does present a bunch of opportunities. I love that you think it's like a good amount of information because most people are like, "Oh my God, there's so much information there." So it doesn't surprise me that a report created by a five social to a five social, you're like, "Yeah, this is great. This is
Yeah.
what I can take in." But
Is
I think it's just really, as long as that fits and the five fits, because you're still trying this on, but seeing kind of how do you be the best five that you can be, and we all have strengths and blind spots.
Yeah. And it even helped the other day because I was at work and we were like we were reviewing this like data set or whatever and getting feedback on changes to make. And I could like feel myself getting like a little like defensive and
Mm.
like noticing it. And so I was like, okay, just sort of like you know, like get it back together. So whatever. And then I really thought about it later. And I was like, I don't really like I wasn't in defense of the work, but it was in defense of like the time that I was gonna have to re-spend on it. And so even just like knowing that in this, like, oh, that's what was happening.
Resource drain. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think just having the information about what it is, and even just like
Yeah.
that red game fire and just or whatever
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. For your, at least for you at this time, it
Yeah.
aim, fire, ready.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thinking about that, thinking about how that serves you. And then there's a simple coaching model called ACE. I don't know if I've told you about this. It's called, it stands for awareness, choices, execution.
Okay.
So a lot of times people are just trying to execute all day, every day, or they'll be like, oh, I'm aware of this now, let me execute. But the step that's missed there, and this is probably the step that you're in, is the awareness gives you new choices, and then you get to choose what you want to execute. And then from that execution, you can loop back around and be like, okay, well, I tried to implement this. In this context, it didn't work. In this context, I liked how this worked. Do I want to change my default strategy? Maybe not today, but I think in this particular scenario. So it's just having that curiosity and that kind of analytical mindset, like for your own life and quality of life and decision making.
Yeah, I do think that is such a big part of it, the awareness, and especially just like this past year, I feel like so much has like come into view, and so it's fun to like keep going into that like more and more.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for this time and for sharing. I so appreciate you and your insight, and I love getting to know you even better.
Yeah, thank you. This is
Yeah.
fun.